So I read this post on Facebook that I think has gone viral, which was an Onion headline that said, man's heart stops briefly when speaker asks members of the audience to turn to each other and talk. Which I'm giving you warning now, I'm about to ask you to do. So either escape or dive in and plan to have fun and play with us together. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't start with a story. So, once upon a time, there was a young man in a shtetl in Eastern Europe who didn't believe in God. And he was adamant that he wasn't going to go to shul and he wasn't going to study Torah. And he went to his rabbi one day very frustrated and he said, "Rabbi, I'm an atheist and I need someone who understands me. I don't know what to do." And the rabbi said, "I have just the person for you. In the next village over, at the edge of the woods, there is the most famous atheist in the world. His name is Moshe the Atheist. And you should go find him and study with him. Tell him I sent you." So the young man packed up his stick and his kerchief and his bread and cheese, and he trudged off through the forest. And in fact, when he got to the edge of the forest, just like the rabbi had promised, there was a little hut with some smoke coming out of the chimney and a little door, and he knocked on the door and he said, "Excuse me?" And a voice from inside said, "Yes." He says, I'm looking for Moshe the Atheist." And the voice says, "Yes, come in." So the young man opens the door, and there in the hut is a big table covered with books and Talmud, and the man is wearing a kippah, and he has payas and talit, and he big long beard, and he looks up and he says, "Yes, can I help you?" And the young man says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking for Moshe the Atheist." And Moshe says, "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" And the young man says, "You're Moshe the Atheist? Okay, well, my rabbi sent me. I'm an atheist too, and I've come to study with you." And Moshe moves down his spectacles and peers over them at the young man and says, "Ah, you're an atheist, huh? Have you studied Torah?" The young man says, No, I'm an atheist." He says, "Have you read Talmud?" The young man says, No, aren't you listening? I'm an atheist." Moshe goes back to his book, goes, "You're not an atheist, you're an ignoramus." Why do you think I told you that story? Shout it out. You got to study it. Whatever it is, before you reject it, maybe get a little bit of information about it. Why else might I have told you that story? It had a beginning, a middle, and end. Awesome. We know that about story. There are at least 2 more reasons. Make them up. As an icebreaker. Yeah, I said, but we're going to talk about story. I better start with a story.
There's a lot of Jews in New York City.
There are a lot of Jews in New York City. That's right. You got to connect with your audience. Yes. All of those things and whatever else you were secretly thinking in your head as I was telling you might be the reason are the reasons. Because as we start to talk about story and the power of story, you're going to get a whole flow this afternoon from different awesome speakers. And where I want us to start is with the place of asking the right question about story. And I think that question is not if we should use story in business, but how do we use story in business? Because in fact, what it seems to be coming more and more clear is that story is meaning. That in fact, we are telling and hearing and making up stories in our head all the time. That's the way our brains work. And there's neurobiological studies that are actually tracking this. Jerome Bruner, the cognitive psychologist, says it just that way. Story is meaning. So if, whether it's in business or any other context, we're saying, I don't know about this story thing, I'm not sure I'm a believer in using story, we're missing the point. The point is not, do we use story? The point is, how consciously, how effectively do we use story? How aligned is the stories that we're telling with our intention or the moral that we want to give to the audience that we're talking to? How aligned is it with their needs and interests? If I'm telling a story about Moshe, how many Jews are in my audience? So right now, raise your hand if you feel like Yep, I am absolutely a storyteller. I'm a great storyteller. So I'm going to guess maybe 7% of the crowd is raising their hand. Let's see if we can up this right now. I'm going to tell you, here is what I am going to promise you, that I believe inside your head there is a little safe, locked away, secret, brilliant storytelling ability, and we're going to unlock that for you right now. So this is the moment where the Onion headline comes true. Please find someone next to you, turn to them, say hi, and say, will you play with me? Go. All right. Here's how this is going to work. Come on back. The person in your pair who has the longer hair is going to be the storyteller. All right. Storytellers, this is what is going to happen. You have the easy job. The other person in your pair is going to inspire a brilliant story. You are going to seed a brilliant story, and this is how you're going to do this. You are going to give your partner 3 random words, and then they are going to tell a 30 to 60 second story. So it might look something like this. Could I have 3 random words? Okay, I heard balloon. I heard balloon, burrito, and salsa. So let's say burrito and salsa are one, balloon is another. Give me something else random that does, and pterodactyl. Thank you very much. Okay, so little Jimmy was very excited to get a balloon at the zoo. He was so excited that he ran away from his mom and stole all the rest of the balloons. They were, as you can imagine, so much helium, and he was such a tiny little kid that they started to lift him off the ground. And he went flying through the air, over the zoo, all the way across some strange land, so far that he fell into the dinosaur pit, where he was visited by a pterodactyl. And he said, "You can fly?" And the pterodactyl said, "Yes, so can you." And they had a wonderful time playing together. Then the pterodactyl said, "You know, I'm a frightening dinosaur, and I eat people if I ever find them, little mammal animals, so I'm going to eat you." And the boy said, "No, don't eat me. Look, I have a burrito with salsa. That's even better." The end. Okay. So, as you can tell, it doesn't have to be a good story. Dare to be boring, dare to be obvious, dare to be silly, dare to be ridiculous. Your brain, whether you are Moishe the atheist, whether you are a rabbi, whether you are a CEO of a company, whether you are a burrito maker, your brain is already a treasure trove of storytelling ability. We tell stories when we're telling stories. We tell stories when we're listening to stories. We tell stories when we see a graph of the quarterly earnings. We tell a story when the clicker doesn't work and we make up a story about why that's happening. We tell a story when we're standing in line for food or when there's no toilet paper in the bathroom. It is the way our brain must do it. So the question is, in all of our brains, there's this little treasure trove of story, because story is how we make sense of the world. What do we do in business? How do we take that gold, that treasure, and turn it into a tool that we can use in business? We know what these things are, right? You've already told me. We know a story has a beginning, a middle, and end. We know there's conflict. We know there's cause and effect. There are characters, antagonists and protagonists, vivid images, metaphors. Did you have those in your stories as you told them just naturally? Yes? At least some of them? When you didn't have them, did you go like, I wanted to have more of that? Right? We know what it is. So the question is, how do we focus that? How do we turn that into a tool for business? You know, I think that, again, this question of, do I tell a story in business? Sometimes we think, it's not appropriate, or it's not professional, or it's not serious. Well, let's look at Aristotle's 3 levels of argument. Is that serious enough for you? Yeah. Okay, excellent. So what are they? Anybody know? Yeah! Woohoo! Very nice. Give that girl a burrito. Okay. So logos is actually very popular at business, and we're very comfortable with it, right? Logos means it has a logic or a rational thought. We have like, what is the cause and effect of the argument? Well, guess what? Story's great for logos. When we work with organizations, we use storytelling techniques a lot to talk about what's the vision, what's the current state, and how are we going to actually problem solve and get there. Or let's gather stories from people and find out what explanations they are making for why things are working or not working here. So story isn't separate from logic or science as much as religion. Story is logos. If it has a beginning and middle and end, if it has a cause and effect, we're happy with it. If it doesn't, we don't like it. Second is ethos. We're also okay with that in business. And often in business, when we're working with speakers and they're trying to come up with stories, it's based in this ethos, or what is the moral that I want to get across to people, or what do we care about, or what are our values. And you can have as many values as you want on a chart, but it's the examples in organizations of someone did this and this happened, or we reward this, or here's how we're going to go out of our way to serve this value that matter. So stories illustrate your values in a way that just articulating them don't. And finally, pathos. This is the one where historically we have been a little bit uncomfortable in business, right? That we've sort of separated our humanity and our emotions and our feelings from our work and our professional lives. And gloriously, increasingly, we're realizing that being human is not separate from being a professional, and being passionate and emotional is a wonderful thing to bring to work. And having a story is a way that makes us smarter and better and more committed to what we're doing. So for all of these very serious Aristotelian reasons that allow you to have more influence and more impact and more motivation and get better results, story is a great tool. We could spend, as we do with our clients, days and days giving you explicit tools, and story sellers like myself do that. They say, here are the stories you must be telling. Here's the way you must structure a story. And there are wonderful, wonderful tools, like you'll just hear in a minute, where people have figured out what can I do so that I don't have to figure out it myself to be cleaner and more explicit about my stories and have more impact. But the bottom line is this. There are just a couple of things that you need to ask yourself to be able to use story in an effective way, whether it's in business or anywhere else. And here they are. Remember that I'm co-creating it. So I'm going to tell you what I care about, and I'm going to try to connect it to what you care about. The questions I ask on my end are, what is the moral of my story? What is it I want you to know? And what do I want you to do differently after you've heard me talk? How do I want you to be changed? And then the questions that you ask about your audience are, what do they care about? And what's in it for them to do what I want? Once you've asked those questions, you've focused your story, you pick it, and you will rule the world. So before I leave, here is my call to you. I want you to use story. I want you to gather it. I want you to notice it. And I want you to start consciously thinking about, what is my intention when I'm choosing to tell this story or communicate in this way? And what's in it for my audience that's going to make them care and be moved and do it? Thank you.